What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
I've tried to understand it because I experienced a little bit of what it's like just by trying to teach you how to read, first as your mom, then as your teacher and kind of your teacher mom. But I honestly, like in my gut and my heart, I don't really understand what it's like.
What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
Well, I don't know exactly, so I can only imagine. But from what I've seen, I guess it's harder to learn to read if you have it than if you don't have it.
Okay.
And probably harder to learn to write too.
Okay. What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
Well, I think it must be frustrating to be looking at something and what you see is not what it is. That would be very frustrating. I'd get frustrated easily.
Okay. What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
Well, I have two children, they're both dyslexic, so I know a great deal about it. I think it's very tough to have dyslexia, especially when you're little, because everybody else is so different from you. And until you understand how to learn and what dyslexia means for you, it can be very challenging, and it can beat apart your self-esteem and make you think that you're not smart when I think you're really very, very smart.
What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
I imagine that it's really hard, and that oftentimes when other people don't understand, that they would make you feel bad.
What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
I think it'd be really difficult to do normal things like reading or homework and stuff like that. I think it's a big problem for a lot of kids and a lot of people in general. I can't really imagine it quite well at all.
What do you think of dyslexia?
Well, my daughter has dyslexia, so I know that it's very challenging, but I understand that she sees things differently and learns differently, but I don't know what it's like to experience it.
What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
I think having dyslexia would be very challenging for people, and I think it's something that you eventually adjust your life to, but I think it would be a challenge.
What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
Well, I'm guessing it'd be pretty hard to learn your different subjects since it's kind of harder to read that way.
What do you think it's like to have dyslexia?
I would imagine that it would be pretty hard to understand information that is being written on paper. I would imagine that that words and letters and numbers would get jumbled up in your head, and it'd be pretty hard to go through something like a reading class or read a book. So.
Okay. Okay. What do you think of dyslexics? Do you think they're smart, dumb, average?
I would never say dumb. I would never say dumb. I know that throughout history there's been lots of people who have had dyslexia who have made huge contributions to the world, the sciences, the arts. In fact, my favorite author, Fannie Flagg, has severe dyslexia, and she's written a lot of books, and even one of her books was made into a movie. So I know that I would never say dumb, never.
What do you think of dyslexics? Do you think they're smart or dumb?
They're some of my favorite people. I think there's probably little to no connection between intelligence and dyslexia. You can be dyslexic and smart, you can probably be dyslexic and dumb, or anything in between.
Okay. And what do you think of dyslexics? Do you think they're smart, dumb, average?
Oh, I think they're smart because they've overcome a difficulty, and they've figured out how to overcome that. So it takes a lot of willpower and a lot of smarts to overcome that, to learn how to operate with that.
What do you think of dyslexics?
I think dyslexics are very intelligent people. I think they are people that have brains that are wired very differently than everybody else, and it's hard for them to understand that until they get older, but I think they tend to be very, very bright people.
Okay. What do you think of dyslexics?
I think that they are just as smart as everybody else, and I think that since they have to work twice as hard as everybody else to make things work for them, that will help them later, because most of life is working hard, and I think they're already very good at it when they learn to read.
What do you think of dyslexics? Do you think they're smart, dumb?
I think people with dyslexia would be considered more intelligent than regular people because they have to put a lot more effort into what they're reading and whatever they're working on that people without it could do really quickly.
What do you think of dyslexics? Do you think they're smart, dumb?
I actually think they're very brilliant. I think sometimes the way that they learn differently as far as reading, they have definite benefits in other ways of learning.
What do you think of dyslexics? Do you think they're smart, dumb?
I think they're smart. They're not dumb at all. They just see things a little differently.
What do you think of dyslexics? Do you think they're smart, dumb?
No, I don't think they're any different from anybody else. I mean, it's not like, they're the same as everybody else. It's just that they can't read as well.
What do you think of dyslexics? Do you think they're smart, dumb?
I don't think they're dumb. I think they're actually pretty smart. There was a girl on Disney Channel, and she is dyslexic, but now she reads like two levels above her grade.
What is it like to teach someone who has dyslexia, since you teach me and I have dyslexia?
When I first started to teach you how to read, it was very frustrating because I didn't know you had dyslexia, and I didn't understand how I would show you a word and we would learn a word, and then the next time you saw it, it was as if you were seeing it again for the first time. And it would happen over and over and over, and I used to get so frustrated, and I didn't understand what was going on, and I would get, like impatient with you, and I feel bad about that because I truly didn't understand what was happening with you. I think I'm a lot better now understanding it.
Last question. What do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
Again, I'm just guessing, but I guess it's probably harder and more frustrating, and probably harder still if they're in a classroom with other people who aren't, because the teacher might not even know they're dyslexic and not understand why they're having a problem and not know what to do about it.
What do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
To teach someone with dyslexia, it takes a lot of patience, I'm sure. And you need to have patience and have an understanding for what they're going through as they're learning.
What do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
I think you have to understand that they learn differently and they have to do things differently, and I think as long as you understand that and accept that, then I think there should be no problems.
Okay, so what do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
I think it's a lot like teaching other people, except you have to remember to do certain things to help them, like to make sure that they have enough time to write the things they need to write, and to make sure that they only read aloud if you ask them to, that kind of thing. But I think they're just as smart as everybody else, so they're definitely not hard to teach.
What do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
I think it would be a lot different than teaching someone without it, because it's really not something that someone that does not have it can so easily picture and live with. So someone who teaches have to have a lot of experience with dealing with it to get the point across.
What do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
It's challenging because you have to rethink everything. There's no, and not in a bad way, but you have to think outside the box. You have to give different opportunities, try to do more hands-on things, and just learn what works for them so that they can learn the most.
What do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
Well, I have had some experience teaching because my one son has dyslexia. So I just taught him in a way where he felt comfortable.
Oh, what do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
I guess it'd be a little bit harder to do that, but it seems like after you get to know the person, it'd be easier to teach them.
Okay. What do you think it's like to teach someone who has dyslexia?
I would imagine it would be pretty hard. You can't really, if you're not dyslexic, you can't really relate to the dyslexic person. And you would have to figure out a way to help the dyslexic person understand what you're teaching. So, I would imagine it's pretty hard.
Okay. We would just like you to read this, but first explain what it is.
Oh, I know what this is. I've had a little bit practice, but it's a simulation to help people like me who don't have dyslexia, especially teachers, because sometimes they don't really have this sort of compassion or the empathy they should have for some of their students who have dyslexia. It's something to help us understand what it's like, a direct experience of what it's like. So should I start?
Yes.
Okay. We begin our trip. We begin our trip in a familiar place. A body like yours and mine.
A mass-produced rassus. Rassus are remum. A mass-produced remum. All right. So the code in each cell is identical. Razorcarpable.
Unique. Wait, no. Identical. A.
Contains a. I see how you want to do it. That's key's tough, man.
Billion calls. And oh boy. That work together.
Is a learn disability. You nay des creseb at quo the atith as not hiag ought bo if
And mine. I'd contain a. Let me read the whole thing.
Like if you want to just read as much as you can take.
Okay, I'll try to do a couple more words. This is very challenging.
Hewn out, but with the big, oh my goodness, bigre efo intelligence chill bisa eighth.
That's very hard to read. That's a challenge. What is a learning disability? Very interesting.
You may be surprised to know that it is with. Oh, this is hard. That
It can't be. A mess producing rassus.